This is Janet, and this is my reading log on the Sibert award-winning book, Black Potatoes, by Susan Campbell Bartoletti. Illustrations are from mid-19th century newspapers, published by Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. Copyright was 2001. It is children's nonfiction. It is appropriate for kids around age 14. Here's the picture. I do not have the book. I read it on my phone. Black Potatoes is about the Irish famine in 1845 to 1850. The plight started when, in July of 1845, there were some very hot days in July, followed by about 3 weeks of heavy rain during August that same year. The extreme wet conditions caused a fungus. They didn't realize it was a fungus until much later, but it caused entire fields of potatoes to blacken overnight and render the potatoes inedible. In fact, they did try and eat some of the potatoes. They tried to cut the black spots out, but the fungus was throughout the potato and it made them very sick, especially the elderly and the very young. And for the next several years, it just continued. The British ruled Ireland at the time, and they tried to set rules and acts that would help the poor Irish. They had workhouses that were designed to take in the poor laborers and feed them and clothe them. But when the famine continued for so long, there were too many to help, even with donations from British Parliament, even donations from America. Immigrants that had gone over before sent back money, millions of dollars, to try and help, to no avail. Millions died during this famine. The landowners, the British landowners, of course, couldn't get any rent from the people because there were no potatoes to sell. And the cash crops that they had, wheat and oats, were all exported. The Irish weren't allowed to eat those. They did have livestock. Some families only had one cow, maybe a pig. But they ended up having to sell those for money to buy food. This went on, and though a lot of the Irish saved as much money as they could to immigrate to America or Canada, some went to London in hopes that they could eventually immigrate to America or Canada. In 1848, a rebel group called Young Ireland decided to start a revolution, but it was a complete failure. The British completely outnumbered the Irish, and they didn't have enough support. Ireland once had over 8 million people, and after the famine, after all the death and the immigration, they end up with less than half of that number. And after 1850, the blight continued off and on, but never as bad as during that famine time. The illustrations, like I said, were from newspapers from the time, such as the London News and Pictorial Times. The Irish grew to hate the British for their role in their plight. It was a completely man-made situation. The British had the power to help the Irish, but they lacked the knowledge to and the willingness to help them. They thought the Irish were completely beneath them and were unwilling to help the way that they should have. I believe this book is good for children because it's a lesson in history, and possibly for some students it tells the story of how their ancestors came to America, or to Canada and then to America. I would recommend this story because it's told in an entertaining way. It gives personal accounts of what happened and how their families, complete families, were wiped out. Complete villages were wiped out. That's something that I had never heard before. Children, I think, could learn that while they may have felt hunger before, tummy's rumbling, oh, I'm starving, they really haven't witnessed or felt for themselves what true starvation is. And I hope they never have to find out. A personal story. My mother was born in 1935 during the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl days, and she has told me the stories about how her dad and brothers worked so hard to bring crops in that would pay their bills. And each year, when the crops did poorly or were completely wiped out, my grandpa would put his arm around Grandma's shoulder and say, "We'll give her hell again next year, Lizzie." Sorry. An activity that I would suggest for kids was to have them write some of their thoughts down about this book, how it made them feel, and then maybe have them look online for images about the Great Irish Famine and print 2 or 3 that they feel most depict or define how they envision what it was like during that time. Thank you.